Wonderful. So I'm Dr. Sherry Jones. I'm the chair of the Department of Special Education and Communication Disorders. Our Student Council for Exceptional Children and our Student Speech Language Hearing Association organized this event. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Erin. She's the vice president of our Student Speech Language Hearing Association to introduce our speaker for today. Erin.
Okay, hi, my name is Erin Kirby. I am the president of NISHLA, and I would like to thank you all for being here today to listen to the wonderful Temple Grandin. Temple can be described in one word, and that's inspirational. She is now considered a leader in both animal welfare and autism advocacy movements. She has received her doctoral degree in animal science and is a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. She works to design livestock handling facilities, and her designs are used all around the world. Temple is here today to explain her life experiences with autism and share advice she has for future teachers and therapists. And with great pleasure, I now introduce Temple Grandin.
There's something really messed up with the computer there, that's for sure. I think I want to just tell a little bit about myself. I've been around for a long time, and when I was a little kid, nobody really knew what autism was. And well, we can show it that way if we have to. We can just show it like that. That will work. It's not the greatest, but it will work. Why don't we just put the computer back up here, and we'll just, see if it will change slides if I just click the arrow. Okay, yes, it does. We'll just have to show it like that. Not very pretty, but it will do. One of the big problems we've got in autism is diagnosis is not precise. In fact, diagnosis has changed over the years. Now with the new DMS-5, they're really making it muddy about how much speech delay you have. Nobody is changing the diagnosis for tuberculosis. It's the same now as it was back, when they first discovered it. Diagnosis is not precise. I'm seeing way too many people getting completely hung up on these labels. And they're no more precise than profiling hijackers. It's basically if you have certain traits, you get an autism diagnosis. And if you've got other traits, you've got something else. Well, I can't wait until the day where it'll all be done with brain scans, and I'm going to show you the future of brain scanning. But it's probably going to be a while before it's at your local hospital, because I think sometimes the people that like to do all these labels want to guard their turf, plain and simple. The other big problem we've got in autism is it's such a big spectrum. Tuberculosis is pretty bad no matter what. But you can have a little tiny bit of autism, like Einstein, no language till age 3, or Steve Jobs, a weird loner who brought snakes to school. Now, how about Mozart? What would happen to those kids today in today's school system? Well, no weirdos like Mozart. He was a weirdo. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you got very severe kids. Not going to be doing math, they're not going to be doing art, any of those kinds of things. And this is the problem we have. And the two kinds of kids kind of need different kinds of services. And when the kids are little, they all look about the same. I had no speech until age 4. I looked very severely autistic, but I did not have epilepsy. But then you've got kids that are much more severe with other kinds of stuff wrong with them. And the treatment is the same when they're 3 years old. 20 hours a week of one-to-one intervention. That's the same. Then as you work with them, they kind of diverge. The Asperger kind of kid, and they're actually taking Asperger's out, making it all autism spectrum. Well, what they're going to find in autism when it finally gets into the world of genetics and brain scanning, first of all, the genetics is horrendously complicated. It's not simple, like blonde hair and blue eyes. There's no autism gene. That's absolute BS. A good teacher has to be gently insistent. You got to intrude into these kids' worlds. You can't just let them sit there zoning out. And I had ABA-type speech therapy when I was 2.5 years old. I had a nanny who played constant turn-taking games with me and my sister. You got to teach these kids how to take turns. I cannot emphasize that enough. When they're really little, 2 and 3 years old, treatment's the same. And you know what? You got a kid that's messed up. I'm going to have a new diagnostic label. This covers a lot of kids. Speech is all messed up. Behavior's all messed up. And the kid's 2 or 3 years old and they got a lot of weird behavior. Treatment's pretty much the same. Tons of one-to-one interaction with adults, kind of pulling them out of it, teaching, playing games, teaching them how to talk, things like that. Now the other thing about kids that have a lot of labels, they've got to be stretched. I'm seeing too many kids getting a handicap mentality. I talked to a mom of a 19-year-old honors student who had never grocery shopped by herself. That's ridiculous. You know, obviously we can't, there's no way you're gonna make me an algebra specialist. But you've got to stretch these kids. When I was 15 years old, I was afraid to go to my aunt's ranch. Mother wasn't going to let me not go. It was going to be a week or all summer. I could pick. But if you don't stretch them, they're not going to go anywhere. And I'm seeing too many kids, way milder than me, going nowhere. And they're sitting in the basement playing video games on Social Security. And they're kids that had much less severe symptoms than I had. That is absolutely, totally ridiculous. It makes me nuts. And one of the things I've learned, since I span the world of autism and the world of the livestock industry, who do you think keeps the big meat packing plants from falling down? It's the dyslexic millwright who built it. One of the best millwrights in the feedlot industry is dyslexic. I'm not going to tell you who he is. I've got to keep some confidentiality. There's a plant where the whole maintenance staff, I'm sure, has Asperger's. And they've managed to survive 3 plant owners. Well, how did they get their social skills? This is where in the 50s, man, kids were taught social skills in a very systematic way, and we're not doing enough of that. Now, one principle you've got to follow: no surprises. Surprises cause these kids to go into absolute panic. You don't pull a surprise on them. If they're going to do reconstruction work on the classroom, let's say, you need to tell them in advance what's going to happen. No surprises. They need to know in advance. Now, one of the things that's ignored, and I'm really upset on the DSM-5, is they didn't put sensory processing disorder in as an official thing, and they should. Because sensory processing problems occur comorbid, that's a stupid medical term for in conjunction with. In fact, if you look up what all the Latin names for the brain, they're really stupid things. Like the brain's file finder is called the seahorse, the hippocampus. The membrane over the surface of the brain is the dura mater, which means tough mother. You know, it's kind of silly things. Nothing very scientific about that. And I just told one of my students I didn't think she needed to take neuroanatomy because she can look it up on Wikipedia. I'm much more interested in her taking physiology so you understand how things work. How things work is important. Stupid Latin names for things is not really very important. But the thing is, these sensory problems can be extremely debilitating, and they can be comorbid with dyslexia, autism, ADHD, head injuries, lots of these different labels. Things like sound sensitivity, touch sensitivity. I can't wear scratchy things against my skin. Still have a problem with that. There'll be one kid where when the school bell goes off or the buzzer on the gym board goes off, they're just freaking out because it hurts like a dentist drill hitting their ear. But the thing is, when you take autistic kids or kids with other labels, dyslexic kids or whatever, some kids have problems with the sound sensitivity, others don't. It's extremely variable. Now, it is one of the criteria, you know, that you can have when you have autism, but it's extremely, extremely variable. One kid will have a big problem with fluorescent lights bothering him. Another kid is not going to have this problem. It is exceedingly, exceedingly variable. This diagnosis is not precise. I want you to write that on your computer 100 times. Let me put it on your screensaver. These labels are not precise. 25 years from now, we're going to look back at these labels when we do have state-of-the-art brain scanning, and I'm going to show you the future because I've been in it. And it is actually going to be out in the hospitals real soon, thanks to the Defense Department, because it was designed for head injuries. Walter Schneider at the University of Pittsburgh. The problem is doctors aren't going to know how to use it. That's the problem. Okay, you go in and you test a kid's hearing. This is something that's really important. You got a kid with a label. You test his hearing. And you go, okay, he can hear those little faint sounds. That doesn't tell you about auditory detail, auditory processing disorder, or what the dyslexic literature calls phonological awareness. We've got different names for the same thing. And that's the ability to hear the hard consonant sounds. When there's a problem with the developmental problem with the auditory system, hard consonant sounds are difficult to hear. Even today, when someone says bat, cat, or rat, I can't tell the difference. Obviously, if we're talking about a baseball game, it's not going to be a cat or a rat that they're talking about. You see, I have to figure it out by context. So what teachers need to do is slow down. Slow down. You got a kid with a label, I don't care what the label is, slow down when you talk to them. And that's one of the things my speech teacher did. She'd hold up a cup and she'd go, cup, and then she'd go, cup, cup, cup. Stretch it out. Now, there's kind of two kinds of language problems. And I had problems getting speech out, couldn't get it out. It's like a stutter. And I'm going to show you my messed up auditory circuit. It was done on this new Defense Department scanner. And you can actually dissect out all the brain circuits, the white matter brain circuits. And other kids are echolalic. They yak out all this language, like movie scripts and things like that, but they don't know what it means. You see, in that situation, the meaning circuit is not hooked up. Language is working fine, but they don't know what it means. So you got to teach that echolalic kid what the heck it means. You know what works, and I've talked to echolalic kids that now have full speech, be jumping for joy if a kid's echolalic. You got language. Teach meaning with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flashcards. Now you put those on your iPad, but you want to make sure that when that screen comes up there, there's a picture of the cup and the word cup on that same screen. So when you're looking at that screen, it may say cup, the picture is there, and the word is there, written all at once. That's extremely important. I cannot emphasize that enough. Whether you use the iPad or use cardboard, I cannot emphasize that enough. Start with nouns first. Then you do your position words. So I take a toy airplane. It went on the shelf. It flew over the table. Then you have it on a sign too when it does that. Start with nouns first. You got to just program those words into his head. You know, let's start with food items: juice, milk, cereal, stuff like that. Another problem you have when the brain's got a problem, either from a head injury or from a developmental disorder. And the thing that's interesting about sensory issues, guess what? They're the same in head injuries and developmental disorders. They're also extremely variable. See, what happens in a head injury is you rip circuits in half. What happens in developmental disorder is they don't grow right. But the end result's the same kind of problems. And brains that have labels have attention shifting slowness. The processing speed of the brain is slowed down. You can probably find some videos of Gabriella Giffords on TV. And the thing, now I've looked at all of her brain scans really carefully, and her personality's intact because she still had one whole frontal cortex that wasn't wrecked. The language center was taken out, but a lady's brain's got a big enough corpus callosum, and she speaks extremely slowly. You see, half the brain was wrecked. It was, unilateral damage, and the personality's there, but speaks extremely slowly. That's processing speed. Okay, now let's just demonstrate a thing on attention shifting. Okay, normal people get all these little social signals from the eyes. I didn't even know that eyes had signals. All right, but the other thing that this shows, okay, if you got people with electronic tracking software tracking their eye movements, look at how many times the normal person looks back and forth compared to the autistic. This is going to apply to other labels too. Attention shifting slowness. So one of the things you got to make sure you avoid is a phenomenon called clipping. Okay, let's say I come up to you, you're a little kid, a little 5-year-old, and I said, put your coat in the closet. He might hear closet. The coat part got left off. So what you need to say, Tommy, I need to ask you to do something. Now I got the channel open. Got the channel open now, I got the attention shifted. Put the coat in the closet. These are some very, very, very simple things that you can do working with these kids. Super simple stuff. Well, you see, my background, I have a lot of neuroscience background. So I approach things a bit different. I'm a kind of hardcore scientist. You start the brain and work out. Now, another screw up you can have in the visual system, now I don't have this, is pixelation of the image. On your big screen TV, and I have found this in a hotel, if the plug in the back's jiggling, makes a real mess out of the picture. And you get or the satellite dish is shaking, and you're getting these little squares in the picture, that's pixelation. Well, there's a similar thing that happens happen in the visual system. It's not in the eye. Eye exams often are normal, or nearly normal. It's back here. This is where the graphics files are formed, the whole back third of the brain. It's all graphics stuff. And you have circuits in there for shape, color, motion, and texture. They've got to work together to form a picture. You know what? Scientists don't even know how it works. They know where the circuits are located. And when people have strokes, they break in weird ways. How about stop motion coffee pouring like this? That'd be kind of fun. But this shows after the migraine, the pixelation of the image. Well, you can get these migraine symptoms in some people that are labeled dyslexia or autism. They have trouble reading, they see print jiggle on the page. The visual images are pixelating. Okay, what's a sign that something's messed up back here in the back of the brain? How can you tell in a classroom? Kids do a lot of this stuff. Boy, I can tell you, kids that have these problems, they're going to be auditory learners. These kids are going to learn best with their ears. I'm the kind of kid that learn best with my eyes. And I'm going to show you brain scans as to why I learn best with my eyes. This is the kid that looks out the corner of his eye because his central vision's all messed up and they can see better with the peripheral vision. This is the kid that might be terrified of escalators because they can't tell how to get on and off them. If I brought them in this building in the elevator and I had them walk down the fire stairs, they're going to be acting like a blind person on a strange set of stairs. They're the kids where fluorescent lights, they drive them crazy because they can see the flicker. The number one worst thing in a school environment is 60-cycle fluorescent lights. Boy, I'd like to ban them. Now they can maybe use LEDs, maybe use higher cycle fluorescent lights. And the eye exam may be more or less normal, maybe a little strabismus or something, but more or less normal. Okay, ask a child that's having difficulty learning to read, do you ever see the print jiggle on the page? Ask them if it's a college student, you drive at night. Ask them about the fluorescent lights. I am finding in my cattle handling class, I got one of these in every class of 60 students at Colorado State. And their grades are usually not very good. All right, let's talk about some simple things we can do to help this. Simple stuff that's so simple, be stupid not to try it. Okay, if you're stuck in a room with no windows and fluorescent lights, put an old-fashioned energy waster incandescent lamp next to his desk. Some are gonna like the 100 watt, others are gonna like the 40 watt. Maybe you let them wear a hat in the classroom. Also, laptops and tablets and phones. Those are the only screens that don't flicker. If you've got the old TV type screens, they're terrible. Some of the older flat panels are really terrible. Try printing the homework on different pastel paper. Gray, tan, light blue, light green, all different pastel papers. I had a dyslexic student, and she would have flunked out of school if she hadn't had her laptop and her tan paper. And we're working on remodeling a building, and I had to clean out my office, and I got rid of her old, huge brick of a laptop. This is back when laptops cost a fortune, and they were bricks. That laptop saved her career. Another thing that can sometimes help is the Irwin-colored lenses. And some people think that's a bunch of BS. But the problem is, if you assign people to treatment based on autism, you're going to find that colored glasses only help maybe 10% of them. But they really help that 10%. Or you go down to Walmart and try on the pale blue sunglasses, the pale pinks, some of the pale tans. Sometimes you can just shop around and find some glasses. I've had students in my class that be flunking out of college. They hadn't found the right colored glasses. You know, we get into all this discussion about evidence-based medicine, but I'm talking about something that costs nothing to try. I'm talking about going down to the print shop and experimenting with colored paper. I'm talking about trying on the glasses at Walmart. You don't even have to buy them. You can take a book, you can take a book off the book stand at Walmart, take it over to the glasses, and if it doesn't work, you leave all the stuff in the store. You know, okay? Okay. Now, you have an individual, let's say on the more severe end of the spectrum, got severe sensory problems. Vision is all pixelating, hearing is all messed up, and it takes extreme concentration to screen out the background noise. Just extreme, extreme concentration. This is the kind of kid that's going to need frequent breaks, and this is going to be a more severe kid. See, sensory issues range from mild to extremely debilitating. And in my opinion, they should be a top area of research. But I think part of the problems you've got in the psychiatric community is they don't want to lose their turf. And this is pure neuroscience stuff. If you want to understand how a nonverbal person with autism feels, you need to read these books. How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? And Carly's Voice. Now I have two books, my two main autism books. My two books are Thinking in Pictures, and the other one is The Way I See It. The Way I See It, and Thinking in Pictures. Scientists have learned a lot about the brain. Sensory problems are real. And there's problems with the circuits that join up the different circuits in the brain. That's where the abnormalities are. Now, what is this? This is a music mixing board. You see how you have the little sliding knobs on a music mixing board? This is how genetics of autism works. This is how personality genetics works. Let's say anxiety is one slider. Let's say sensation seeking, wanting to climb Mount Everest, is another slider. You know, there's the different traits have a different slider. Now, if you shove them all the way to the end of the board, that's abnormality. But there's a big range in the middle. When does geek and nerd become mild autism? There is no black and white dividing line. This is not tuberculosis, where you either got it or you don't. It's the little knobs on the music mixing board shoved all the way to the end of the board. See, when you hear a word, see a word, speak a word, or think about a word, different parts of the brain turn on. But you've got to have interconnector circuits. And this is kind of a diagram of the main interconnector circuits in the brain. Well, that's my brain right there. That is all my interconnector circuits done on the new scanner. And you can see how there's little threads. I was the first person with autism to get to try out this scanner. I was the first person to try out this scanner that was not a head injury. The Defense Department is going to put this out in all the hospitals. But we need to learn how to use it is the problem. Okay, let's look at my screwed up auditory circuit. Okay, this is a normal circuit for speak what I see, language output circuit. This is my screwed up mess. See, normally the circuit goes forward, but it couldn't go forward, so it just branched out all over everywhere. And when you look at bandwidth, how much bandwidth have I got? You know what bandwidth is in internet, like dial-ups versus, high-speed internet? This circuit here has got more cables, it's got more fibers. The normal circuit's got more bandwidth than I've got. I've lost over half the bandwidth. That's why I had trouble getting language out. Well, wouldn't it be wonderful in the future that we could scan this? Now, what was done here is I was compared back to a 65-year-old art professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Okay, now, auditory? Oh, this is say what I hear. Oh, auditory, it's terrible for me. This is the normal auditory circuit, and that's mine. That little tiny shrimp. I am definitely not into hearing as my main mode of learning. You see, you need to figure out if the kid's a visual learner, then use vision. If the kid's an auditory learner, let's do auditory. This is a really important thing. Build on the area of strength. There's too much emphasis on deficits and not enough emphasis on strengths. And let's start thinking about how can we build strengths into careers and hobbies and things like that. Trying to make me auditory as my main, way of learning. I had a professor say to me, "Why do you take so many notes?" I'd be in math class, and he said, "Why are you taking so many notes? Can't you just understand it?" Because if I don't write it down, I don't remember it. Here's a picture a little 9-year-old drew. Build on strengths. And how can you tell where strengths are? Sometimes they'll show up in kindergarten. Other times they're going to show up in 3rd or 4th grade. But build on that area of strength. And that was done with me. I was good at art. And my ability at art was always encouraged. A lot of these kids will draw the same anime character over and over and over again. Don't allow that. Let's do anime's house. Let's do his car. Take the thing the kid's fixated on and broaden it. He likes dinosaurs. Let's draw pictures of where dinosaurs live. Let's learn more about dinosaur biology. In other words, use that fixation to learn other things. How long is it? And I know the Brontosaurus is no longer right. The Stegosaurus still is. Well, Stegosauruses are pretty slow. How long would it take a Stegosaurus to walk across campus? Calculate that. That's math. That'd be one way you could get the kid interested. But build on strengths and use fixations to motivate. The mistake is made is we're going to stomp out all the fixations. No, I want to tamp into that. I want to like suck into that motivation and have an associative link to it. So I'm going to do math problems with dinosaurs because that's going to kid will be motivated to do that. Now I'm an extreme visual thinker. I don't like this computer not all the way on the lectern. I am an extreme visual thinker. I think completely in pictures. That is how I think. And that helped me in my design work. In fact, when I was a little kid, everybody thought I was going to be mentally retarded. Half the cattle in this country, when they go to the slaughter plant, are handled in a center track restrainer system that I designed. Tyson's got one here in Nebraska. Cargill's got one here in Nebraska. They've got the Schuyler plant's got my curved handling system. That's doing pretty good for somebody who thought was going to be mentally retarded. But you see, being an extreme visual thinker, I could test run the piece of equipment in my mind. I thought everybody thought this way. You see, this is why I have a talk on TED called Different Kinds of Minds. And when you get a label, there's a tendency for skills to be very uneven. Good at one thing, bad at something else. And there's the DipFat, the handling facility they rebuilt for the movie. And there are my drawings. So I always like to show my drawings off. Now the thing is, when you're a weird geek, doesn't have very good social skills. The way I got jobs was showing up a portfolio of my work. I always had my drawings with them and I showed them to people. You know, and the other thing is I had to stop talking about cattle shoots and start designing them for people. I had to sell my work rather than myself. There's another drawing. Now, how do you form a concept when I got all these pictures in my mind? This little boy showing little boxes in his head. You see, I am what's called a bottom-up thinker. Most people are top-down. When you're word-based, it's top-down. But I am a picture thinker. So I form a concept by putting pictures into categories. And this is the same way this boy does it. You put pictures into categories. Like I put all the dogs in one box, all the cats in another box, all the horses in another box. It's bottom-up. Now, I thought everybody thought the way I did until I was like 40 years old. And how did I find out how my thinking was really different? When I asked people, tell me about a church steeple. How does it come into your mind? I was shocked to find out, because I would do this at autism meetings, so I'd ask a lot of speech therapists. And I was shocked to find out that most people saw this generalized thing. I don't see any generalized thing. I only see specific ones. Wait a minute, they just come up like Google for images. Everything's specific. These all go in the steeple category. And then I could make subcategories, cathedrals, chapels, things like that. Okay, now this is a brain scan that was done on an earlier scanner, not on the fanciest one. Now I got a great big huge visual circuit here. It's twice as big as the control. And when I saw these scans, I'm going, wow. And I got a great big one there. Take another slice there, I got a great big one. This technology is 2006. This has been in the local hospital for quite a while. You know, but I think part of the problem is everybody's so hung up on the labels. See, it's going to change. If we start looking at the brain, we're going to change how we look at labels, because you can go in there with scanning and say, okay, this kid's a visual learner. This kid's got this. Now, things aren't completely, deterministic, because I did learn to talk. But it took a lot of effort for me to start, getting my speech out. But let's say I had no bandwidth. This is what they learn in the veterans. Let's just say the circuit's ripped in half completely. Well, maybe you're not going to talk then. Well, this explains why I'm terrible at math. This is the fluid-filled ventricle. This is back in the parietal area. Trashed working memory. Trashed, there's two kinds of visual thinking. There's the object-realistic visual thinking like me, and then there's the mathematical thinking. And I'm really bad at the and that just trashed it. That's full of water. Okay, this is a really important slide. I'm a photorealistic visual thinker, and I couldn't do algebra. If a kid can't do algebra, then go to geometry. There are a lot of kids that can do geometry but can't do algebra. Just forget about algebra. I think, you know, there's some educational things. I'm seeing too many kids kind of just going nowhere. And then the other kind of thinker, this is the mathematician, pattern thinker. These kids often have trouble with reading. Now you're going to have to learn how to read. But develop that ability in math. You might have a little third grader that ought to have the high school math book in the classroom. Let him have the high school math book. Don't get rid of this PC correctness that they're all saying. That's BS. Because if you don't give him that high school math book, he'll become a behavior problem. Because he's bored stiff. And in my new book that's coming out, The Autistic Brain, we're going into all the scientific research that shows, yes, they really are different kinds of visual thinking. There's photorealistic object visual thinking like me, and there's a visual spatial. See, in the brain, you have a circuit for what is something. That's the photorealistic visual thinking. And the math circuit is where is something. That's the visual spatial. Two different circuits, where and what. And then you've got the guy that knows all the verbal facts about everything. And they're not a visual thinker. And then you've got mixtures of the different kinds of thinking. It all depends upon what circuits grow. You know, now I'm not saying everything is just deterministic by the brain, but I think a better approach is build up on the thing that they're going to be good at. Just to show you, there's two ways of doing the formula, the more verbal way and the more graphical way. Different kinds of minds. Now, to give you a glimpse into the pattern thinker, and that's definitely not my mind, this praying mantis is made out of a single sheet of folded paper. No tape, no cuts. What you see in the background is the folding pattern. And here are some little origami stars that some autistic kids gave to me at a convention. I'm going, wow, I don't think I could make those. Well, I think it's absolutely appalling that a lot of schools have taken out the hands-on classes. Now, I understand now they're starting to put hands-on classes back into the schools. And I think that's really good. Because I'm seeing too many kids where they don't have a shop teacher to get them turned around. You know, in the 50s, girls learned sewing and cooking. I loved sewing. When I was in 4th grade, I had a most wonderful little toy sewing machine that actually sewed. Kids need to be doing more of these kinds of things. I was reading about a new Lego Mindstorms robots that are really cool. Kids need to be building things and doing things with their hands. I think that's really important. We actually have a shortage right now in this country of auto mechanics, welders, electricians, all the skilled trades. They're not going to send those jobs over to China. Those jobs are not going to go away. Houses are still going to have wiring. That's not going to change. Now, how do I think about abstract things? I don't. If I don't have a picture, I don't think. In fact, this is my picture for the power and the glory in the Lord's Prayer. It's a rainbow with a power tower at the bottom of it. This is an important slide when you're working with a lot of kids whose brains are different. They are bottom-up thinkers, not top-down. Concepts are formed by specific examples. Everything is learned by specific example. Say that again. Everything is learned by specific example and then put in a category. So how do I teach the concept of rude? Okay, so I stuck my tongue out at church, that's rude. It goes in the rude category. If I stick my tongue out at church, you don't scream, stop it. You give the instruction. Put your tongue back in your mouth. That is rude. You chew with your mouth open, and then you tell them to shut their mouth. That's rude. You butt in line. That's another example of being rude. You know, these are examples of, rude behavior. See, it has to be learned. You need to do it in the teachable moments out there in the real world. Play games with categories. I can have something that's red, things that are rectangular. I can have an object that's both red and rectangular. Play games with categories. Play that game 20 questions where you got to figure out what the other person's thinking. There's a problem today with learning critical thinking skills. I read an article in the McLean's, that's Canada's version of Time magazine, I was reading in the papers today. I had a Wall Street Journal and a USA Today, so I don't remember which one I read it in, about problems with students graduating from college without learning critical thinking skills. So how do you compare and contrast two editorials with different views? And talk about it in an intellectual way. The autistic mind is in the details. The autistic mind picks the little letters out quicker than the big letters. Now, some people say autistic kids just do scripting. Yeah, in the beginning it is scripting. Kind of think of this kid's brain as an internet. And I can remember when the internet first started, and it didn't have much on it. And you got to fill it up with web pages. That's why you got to get them out doing things. And the more information you can load into that internet inside their head, then they got more different pictures they can put in the little category boxes in the brain, and then they can figure out more subcategories. A lot of these kids are getting too shielded. I'm seeing too many kids, they don't have table manners, they can't shop, they get too sheltered. Now we do have to be careful about some sensory issues and about no surprises, but we gotta get them out doing things. I talked to one parent, her boy didn't want to do sleepaway camp, but then after he did it, he loved it. Okay, I have a friend who's a Boy Scout leader, and she's got had an autistic kid in her troop. Okay, and this little boy would get too close to the other kids. Then you just demonstrate the correct distance of standing. You have to just demonstrate it. Don't be subtle. Subtle doesn't work. You just have to matter-of-factly give the instruction. You're standing too close. Let me demonstrate the correct distance. This is too close. Okay? This is the right distance. You just have to demonstrate it. And I do not want to demonstrate pulling the computer off the lectern. That I do not want to demonstrate. Okay. Teach number concepts of real objects. Have them count things. 2 people, 2 projectors, 2 computers, 2 pencils, 2 buildings on the campus. It applies to a lot of different things. Teach fractions, cutting up fruit, cutting up a pie, cutting up a pizza. Cooking class is a great place to teach all kinds of math. In fact, I've been to several community colleges now that have very good chef classes. I went to chef class just the other day. Half the students in there were kind of dyslexic Asperger kids, and they were being taught fancy chef, not hamburger hash, fancy kind of chef. Teach word concepts, like you want to teach a concept of down. Teach it with several different examples. You go down the stairs. The plane goes down and lands. You put a cup down. You lie down on the bed. Because if I only teach it about the stairs, the kid's going to think it only applies to the stairs. Now, I found that objects were more interesting than looking at people. So I was shown pictures of bridges and stuff like that. Pictures of people. I was more interested in looking at the bridges. I was more interested in looking at some of the trying to figure out where they got all the weird pictures from, looking for old cars in it so I could date them. Some of the social circuits aren't hooked up. And yeah, you gotta learn social skills like being in a play. And one of the things I put a lot of emphasis on is career. Because if I didn't have an interesting career, it's what makes my life worthwhile. That's the thing that really turns me on. Let's do social interaction through shared activities. 4-H and FFA made me sick. They were taking down the livestock barns at the Fort Collins, what used to be our fairgrounds. They're taking the cattle barn, sheep barn buildings down. I just discovered that in the last 2 weeks, going back and forth to the airport. Because 4-H and FFA are great, great, great activities. You know what maker groups are? They're groups where people make stuff. And you can just type maker community groups, and you build like LED things out of LED cool stuff. It's not video games. Some people say, well, we're going to take away all technology. I wouldn't take away all technology. I want to limit the video game playing and the internet surfing to an hour a day. But there's other things with technology that's really cool to do. And it's making stuff. Maker groups, they make stuff. School clubs, school play, band, music, all of these kind of specialized activities. This is where these kids are going to get friends. Interesting classes. When you have a behavior problem, you got to categorize it. Is it biology? Sensory problems are biology. Does this nonverbal individual have a hidden painful medical problem he can't tell you about? Or does he have difficulty processing rapid information? Slow down, slow down, slow down. The brain, when you have something wrong with the brain, either from an injury or a developmental abnormality, processing speed is slower. Now here are some behavioral reasons. Frustration because they can't communicate. They do it to get attention. Maybe to get out of doing something. Boy, I used to do that. Now here are some situations where sensory and neurological problems we have to accommodate. We've got to make some accommodations. Like maybe when a fire alarm goes off, you know, and you've got to do the fire drill, maybe take them out beforehand. There are some kids due to sensory overload, they can't tolerate the supermarket. And there are others where if we gradually desensitize, they can. So we let the kid control how much Walmart he's got to tolerate. So we go into Walmart, it's not so busy. When he's had enough Walmart, he raises his hand and you take him out. In other words, let him control the stimulus. I had a mother write to me that her daughter was nonverbal. She would cut her toenails, cut her fingernails. So I said, let her do it herself, where she controls it. I hated balloons popping. The way to deal with that would be pop a real little one myself, and then gradually pop bigger ones, where I control it. And then some things can be desensitized. Other things can't be. I mean, I still can't stand scratchy clothes. I tolerate those horrible vacuum toilets on planes, but that's not something I have to listen to all day. I have to go, and flush it. It's just a few seconds, I gotta listen to it. Some kids have problems with handwriting. You know what, let them type. Just let them type. Other things that can be a problem, fluorescent lighting, that can be one of the worst problems, and they don't seem to habituate to that. It's just a terrible problem. That's something where a lot of research needs to be done on that. Multitasking, that's another problem area. Don't make them multitask. And the other thing is, brains with problems don't remember long strings of verbal instruction. Working memory problems. Provide written directions. The multitasking thing and providing the written instructions, that's something you need to do. All right, here's bad accommodations that I think can actually cause a handicap mentality. Here's a shy boy that didn't want to do public speaking, and they let him put his talk on his computer. BS. You know, the first talk I ever did in graduate school, I panicked and I walked out. And then the thing that saved me was really good slides on my early cattle handling. I mean, really good slides. Pictures of really cool things. The kid who's allowed to stay in his room all day. When I was in high school and I was having panic attacks, I didn't like going to the campus movies. Well, you know what accommodation they made? They made me the projectionist. That gave me a little more control over the situation. The teenage girl can't do her shopping by herself. I'm talking about an honors student, fully verbal. Can't grocery shop by herself? That's crazy. These are all real cases. Okay, this is where a 50s upbringing helped. Board games. Wonderful way to teach turn taking. We played a lot of cards and a lot of board games. Wonderful activity. Being on time. I'm seeing too many kids today that can't get up and be on time. That was pounded into me. Sometimes you got to do some activities you don't want to do. I had to sit through church whether I wanted to or not. And there were no sensory issues in the church. No, you sometimes just got to do stuff you don't want to do because the family wants to do it. I talked to one family where this little kid, every Saturday they'd go out and they'd do some activity like skateboarding or roller skating or something like that. Well, the autistic kid wanted skateboarding, miniature golf every weekend. Well, his brother didn't like miniature golf. Well, you got to take turns. Brother gets to pick one week, he gets to pick the other week where they go. Saying please and thank you, and what I've already talked about, correcting the social mistakes. Well, this is bad, bad table manners, and the other thing is, I had absolute consistent discipline between home and school. Absolute consistency. The rules were the same. Mother and the teacher were communicating all the time, really important. And being a slob, there's a scene in the movie where my boss slams down the deodorant. That happened. Being eccentric's okay, but being a slob is not. Shaking hands was taught very young. When I was 6, I was serving hors d'oeuvres at my mother's dinner parties. That taught important social skills. Ordering food in restaurants. I knew how to do that when about 8. I was doing that. How to shop by myself. These things were taught very, very young. The rule was if you don't touch it unless you're going to buy it. You don't try on clothes unless you really do plan to buy them, some of them. You have to try on more than one for size. Another thing I think is very bad for all children today, they don't do unstructured play where kids have got to get together and negotiate and make up their own games and their own rules. I'm seeing a horrible lack of resourcefulness today in a lot of young parents. There's the internet right there, they don't think to look stuff up. And then I'm reading all this stuff about, kids graduating from college and they can't compare and contrast to newspaper editorials. That's atrocious. No, we got to prepare people, for the workplace. Okay, let's take in a lot of the humanities classes. I don't care if it's philosophy, history, women's studies or whatever. Every single one of those classes that needs to be built into it. Yeah, writing papers and critical thinking skills. It's okay to be eccentric, rude is not. You know who those people are right there? How many people know who those people are? They're really cool. That is the team that landed the latest Mars rover. Here's the head of the team, that's the Mohawk guy. This is the Elvis guy. He's the one that devised the system of lowering the lander to Mars' surface. He dresses like Elvis Presley. Now we've got a hippie there my age. Boy, you get your Aspies that are technically oriented, this is heaven. Everybody in that room, probably, this is where I want to see the geek go. But again, I want to emphasize, not every Aspie is a tech geek. You've got others that are into the word things. Okay, I had a lot of problems with anger. I got kicked out of high school for throwing a book at a girl. And I had to learn how to cry instead of get angry. It's okay for boys to cry, because that prevents you from going to jail. And when Space Shuttle got shut down, the old scientists my age, they all cried on 60 Minutes in front of the whole nation. Because they've been throwing things that wouldn't have been working for NASA. And I have talked to 2 retired scientists from the shuttle program that have got autistic grandchildren. And they said, you know what? Half the people I worked with were on the spectrum. See, the thing that's a problem, especially on the high end of the spectrum, is the people that ended up getting good careers before going nowhere today. And part of the problem is addiction to video games. And I am one of the kids that would have been a total video game addict if those had been around when I was a child. And I can't program. There's some kids that can learn to program, but I can't. No, I don't have that kind of mind. And I've divided all of society's rules into 3 different categories. You got really bad things you never do, like killing people. You got courtesy rules. Then I gotta have a category for breaking stupid rules. Stupid school rules like algebra comes before geometry. That's kind of stupid because geometry was invented before algebra. So who comes up with that kind of stupid rule? And then you have the things you better not touch, the sins of the system. Boy, you better behave at the airport, you're gonna be in a pile of trouble. Okay, here are some of the hidden painful medical problems you can get in nonverbal individuals. Big number 1 is acid reflux, constipation, urinary tract infections, yeast infections, ear infections, a tooth gone bad. You can get leg cramps. Some people get leg cramps. Well, this can make your behavior really bad. Okay, I get asked about my squeezing machine. Do I still use it? It broke about 5 years ago, so I'm not using it anymore. But one of the reasons I use the squeeze machine is the deep pressure calmed my anxiety. When I got into puberty, I started having horrendous anxiety attacks. Another thing that helped calm my anxiety was a lot of exercise. Too many kids today eat too much sugar and not enough exercise. They also need to have a little animal protein for breakfast. We got to support the cattle and pig industry here in Nebraska. And I'm saying that really, really, really seriously. Because if I don't have some animal protein for breakfast, I don't function. I got the O blood type. I find most of the people that have failed vegans, they all got the O blood type. And I'm seeing too many kids, they're having Pop-Tarts for breakfast, and then they want to put them on medication because by 10 o'clock in the morning, they're fidgety just all over the place. Now, I found out why I had so many panic attacks. My amygdala, the brain's fear center, or in the old days it's called the almond. I didn't know what it was for, so they called it the almond. And it's 3 times larger. My fear center is 3 times larger. Now, I want to emphasize that's not true for everybody with autism. This is where autism is so variable. It's only true for some people with autism. I can't emphasize this variability enough. I have been on antidepressants for over 30 years. They saved me. They stopped all the stress-related health problems I had. In the movie, I got a question here about eating yogurt and Jell-O. I was eating yogurt and Jell-O when I was in my 20s because I had nonstop colitis attacks. And I'd eat yogurt and Jell-O for maybe a week, and then I'd wean myself off of it. And when I went on the antidepressants, guess what? My health problems cleared up. The headaches and the colitis were cured. That was caused by being in a constant state of stress all the time. I know a lot of people where a little bit of Prozac, a little Zoloft, a little Lexapro, something like that really makes a difference. But a lot of people on the spectrum need a much lower dose. And there's genetic differences in how people metabolize drugs. But a lot of people on the spectrum, especially for the antidepressants, things like Prozac, might only need 1/2 to 1/4 the starter dose. I've had 100 parents say to me, "You did great on a little dose, we doubled it, and now he can't sleep, and he's all agitated, and he's got insomnia." And there's way too many drugs being given out to little kids like candy. Let's try in little kids the special diets. They help some kids. Wheat-free, dairy-free. Let's try omega-3 supplements. We have an omega-3 deficient diet in this country. Let's try some of that stuff first. There's a rear view of me in the squeezing machine. Pressure works for some, it doesn't work for others. There's an OT doing some pressure stuff. Try some of your speech therapy right while you're doing some pressure. See, a lot of these kids have hearing is like a bad mobile phone. And like I find if you're in this place where the connection's kind of bad, kind of fades in and out. Like if I move around, it fades in and out. But if I get in just the right position, then I can hear. There's this one spot in the Denver airport that I got to stand perfectly still on this one floor tile, and it'll work. And if I move, then it gets garbled. But when you do some of these calming activities, it's sort of like taking a phone outside to get a better connection. It stabilizes it somehow. Some kids really react well to slow swinging. I'll give you another little hint. Singing uses separate circuits. Try singing words, especially with some of your more severe clients, regardless of label. Just try it. People talk about, well, we got to have evidence-based this and evidence-based that. But the problem that you've got is autism is so variable that using autism as a way to assign subject to treatment is BS. I'm talking about stuff that's so simple. So you try a little singing and see if it works. It doesn't cost anything. Some kids react to weighted vests in a good manner, others don't. Sometimes sitting on a ball helps some kids. I think it's important to get these little kids desensitized so they like being hugged. I think that's extremely important. Remember, deep pressure is calming. Tickle touches set off an alerting response. You want to get these kids so they can, and actually hugging is one of the easier things to desensitize. Fluorescent lights can be extremely difficult, but the hugging, you just have to keep trying, pushing it a little bit. Employment. We're not doing anywhere near enough on employment. Working on employment needs to start in middle school. They need to start learning work habits in middle school. And volunteer work does count. They need to start doing jobs outside the home. When I was 15, I took care of the horse barn. Every day I cleaned the horses and fed the horses. I had a great science teacher who got me motivated. This is where the kind of unconventional teacher got me interested in science, got me interested and motivated in studying. Take kids out and show them interesting stuff. Yeah, oil rigs have joysticks too. So we do a little illegal one up at on a Sunday afternoon. We go out to the oil rig and we get talking to the guys, and we let the 8-year-old have a peek in the control room, and you keep them totally away from the drill. You don't let anything go wrong. Don't let the suits find out about it. Because if you don't show kids interesting stuff, they don't get interested in interesting stuff. I'd rather have the kid fixated on running an oil rig than sitting in the basement playing video games. Well, when I was in high school, I wasn't doing very much studying, but boy, I did a lot of carpentry work. I fixed up a crappy old ski tow house. I made it look really nice, but I made it look nice in a way other people would like. So you've got to learn how to use your skills, and other people are going to like what you do. Here's good jobs for middle skilled kids. Walking dogs, fixing computers. How about make PowerPoint presentations for people? No, and don't put all the stupid noise effects and stupid things that move. Nobody wants all that garbage all over their slides. Making greeting cards and selling them. How about maintaining the church or the neighborhood website? How about working in a farmer's market? Okay, around here you've got all kinds of farming stuff. How about feeding dairy calves? Think jobs that middle school kids could do. Feeding dairy calves in the little pens that they're in. That's a good job for a 12-year-old. And then Lego Mindstorms has some really great stuff. A lot of schools have robotics clubs. Getting kids involved in this sort of stuff. Another really great thing, there's one of my drawings. I'd like to show those up. Here's one of my drawings in SketchUp. SketchUp's a free software on the internet for doing 3D drawing. Just type SketchUp into Google. There's all kinds of fabulous stuff on the internet. We got to start looking more at our research, at the community colleges that got all kinds of great 2-year career degrees. I'm seeing too many smart kids that graduate from college are not going anywhere. We got to get a lot more into how do we get into a good career. Here's all the free good stuff you can get online. I'll leave that up there for a while. I want you to write down all that stuff. Khan Academy, I'm sure you know about that. Udacity, free programming. edX, more free classes. Coursera, free classes from top universities. Okay, I'm going to leave that up there so you can write those things down. And we're going to take a few questions off the floor right now. I want to just leave that slide up there so that people can write down these resources. Okay?
Have you ever had your brain mapped while you were doing a social interaction?
Well, the question was having my brain mapped while I was doing a social interaction. No, I haven't had that done. They did the thing. See, one of the problems is you can't move in the scanner. You can't talk in the scanner because it messes up the scans. The only thing I can do is press a switch that's in my hand. So that makes it very difficult to do a social interaction when the only thing I'm allowed to do is I have a switch in my hand and I can either press it or not press it. And I have to keep my hand, I can't even move my whole arm. I have to only keep my hand down at my side like this, because you have this thing around your head, and just, that's all I'm allowed to do in the scanner. See, because if you do any movement, the scans are wrecked. Okay, let's take another question. So that's why there are studies where they've looked at the face recognition in the scanner, the fusiform gyrus. Yeah, that can be done, and then recognizing expressions, and there are defects in the fusiform gyrus. And I have that defect. I don't have any pretty pictures to show of that, but my findings are the same as most other people's. Okay, right there.
I'm kind of interested to know how you got into college.
How to get into college?
Yeah.
Well, Mother and the dean got together, and I was sort of let in the back door. And this is where we've got to get a whole lot better about how do we get in the back door? How do we use networks? This is one of the things that my mother is really interested in doing. She's been kind of she likes to have these conference calls where she gets heads of different groups, like only 3 or 4 on the line with her, where they can really kind of get to know each other and discuss stuff. Okay, let's just look at my situation. Mother took me into Bronson Brothers at Boston Children's Hospital, a neurologist. I didn't go to a psychologist. I went to a neurologist originally. And there's actually an endowed chair at Boston Children's Hospital now for Bronson Brothers. And they checked me for the 2 things that they could test for in 1949, epilepsy, which was clean, and deafness. I was definitely not deaf. It's all only things they could do then. Then Bronson Brothers and another doctor that was there referred my mother to a little speech therapy school that 2 teachers taught out at their basement. And then the speech therapy lady had another lady that had a summer camp. And then Mother got in touch with a local little elementary school and talked to the principal. It was a lot of neighborhood networking, and we need to be finding these back doors. You know, and it's, I call it getting creative. And so I went into college on probation. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to take algebra, because back in, it would have been 66 I went to college, freshman college, and in 66, it was finite math rather than algebra. We were having a new math fad. And the finite math, with a ton of tutoring, I was able to do. If it had been algebra, I would have been dead. See, and this is something I think they need to change. But you see now, looking at all the stuff that's on here, what these things are, these free courses, you can get badges, you know, like merit badges, and if you have done the certain Udacity classes, you're going to be a programmer, the employer will take you. Because you can start assembling portfolios here. And they go, oh, we don't give a Stanford degree. No, they don't. But they do give a certificate saying that you did do this online class and you took the exam. And the way they do the exams is, and then you have to pay for this. This is not free. You have to go into a proctored exam. This is the only way you can deal with the cheating, is you have to go in and take a proctored exam. Otherwise, the cheating would just be rampant. But, you know, the problem we've got with kids with uneven skills is they can be really super good at one thing. You see, the Japanese nuclear power plant needed me on the design team. When I found out why they blew up, I couldn't believe it. A visual thinker would never make the mistake they made. How many people in here know why those nuclear reactors blew up? I'll tell you why they blew up. Well, you know, when a nuclear reactor gets shut down, when it loses its external, even when you turn off a nuclear reactor, you still have to run the emergency cooling pumps. Well, they have big generators the size of trucks. Guess where those generators were? They were in a non-waterproof basement. That is why 4 nuclear reactors melted down. The mathematician doesn't see that. I saw that. I could see the water coming in there. You gotta get kids, you gotta show kids interesting stuff. Okay, right there.
At what age did friends become important to you?
Well, I had friends. The question concerned friends. When I was in elementary school, I had friends. You see, kids like to make things. When I was a little kid, kids made things. And we'd go out and we'd build tree houses together. I can remember an assignment in 4th grade where we had to make caveman tools with no modern stuff. And I had a friend named Eleanor, and we went out and did that. Even when I was in high school, I had friends I went riding with. The friends all came through the shared interests. This is one of the reasons why things like horseback riding, for me in high school, was horseback riding, model rocket club, and electronics lab. Those are the places where I had friends. That's why we got to get kids involved with shared activities like that. You know, and I'm seeing way too many kids do way too much solitary screen time. You know, we need to be controlling how much video game playing is going on and how much YouTube surfing is going on. If we don't ban these things, an hour a day during the week, 2 hours a day on the weekends, that's the rule I had for TV. You limit it. We don't ban video games, but we're going to limit it. And there need to be some strict limits. You're talking to somebody here that could be a video game addict if those things have been around. Now, this is the optical illusion room that I was shown. And I really did make one. The movie showed all of my projects accurately. You know, and you can get the movie on Amazon. It's Temple Grandin. It's the name of the movie. You can buy it on Amazon. And there's the movie crew. There was lots of Asperger's on that movie crew. And how did they get the jobs? They had a friend that knew somebody that asked them to help make some scenery. And I asked a lot of people how they got their jobs when I was down there on the movie site. And there's the plant where I started. Avoid the front door interview process. Okay, I know if you want to work at Walmart, you got to do a stupid thing online. Well, get someone to help you do the thing online. And then network with a sympathetic manager who helps with the online crap. You know, it's called getting in the back door. It's called getting resourceful. We don't have enough of that. And I think taking the hands-on classes out, cooking, sewing, woodworking, welding, metal shop, all that kind of stuff, those classes teach resourcefulness. You have a real lack of resourcefulness. You know how I got into that Swift plant where I started? I was wearing my portfolio. Here's my hand-embroidered shirt. I used my 3rd grade embroidery skills that I had learned to make this shirt. I was wearing my portfolio. How about jobs for visual thinkers? What I do is industrial design. There's a whole field called industrial design. You can major in industrial design. See, Steve Jobs was an artist, you know, when he did the iPad and the iPod and all that stuff. Engineers make the insides work. Auto mechanic, it's a good job for visual thinker. How about veterinary technician, animal trainers, photography, AV technician? I'm going to just leave those up there for people to run. We're going to do some more questions. Okay, right there.
And what are your thoughts about the media's presentation of autism?
The media's presentation of autism?
I don't know if you've seen the TV program Parenthood, for example.
Yeah, as I haven't. What do you think of it?
Well, I think it's improving.
Yeah, I think it is too.
But I just wonder.
Well, and of course the HBO movie got really wide release, and I think
Yes.
that was really helpful.
Yes.
And you know, the producer of that movie, Emily Gerson Sainz, is the mother of an autistic child. And that's why she you know, and she wanted to really have that be right. I think we've got to be getting more people out in the autism world showing what we can do. I'm really getting concerned about this handicap mentality. Seeing too many kids sitting in the basement playing video games all day long. No, that's not the thing to be doing. The other thing I'm getting concerned about, you know, you take the geeky kind of things. I don't know, people are getting, you know, tech companies can't hire enough programmers and scientists. You know, they're getting people in from China because they can't get what all the kids here ought to be doing. Those jobs are, you know, getting in trouble with the law and all kinds of other bad stuff because they weren't exposed. You know, that shop teacher's gone. That could have turned that boy around. Now he's labeled oppositional defiant, and you know, and that's a real bad deal. And I question that as a medical diagnosis. I'm just too much of a hardcore biologist. Okay, right here.
Do you think that psychological services play an important role? I'm thinking of a child with a huge behavioral oppositional defiance.
Well, psychological services, yes, you have the right counselors. They can really play a big role. One thing that's being learned about boys, they need male figures. It doesn't necessarily have to be a dad. It can be the shop teacher. But they need male role models. And a lot of the male role models in sports behave really badly. But they need a good male role model. That is something that boys that tend to get into trouble need. Sometimes that counselor could be that role model. You know, I mean, counseling, I mean, yeah, that's sort of like asking, counseling and psychology services done right can be extremely helpful. You know, and then you've got families that are totally dysfunctional. This is something that my mother's really concerned about. Families that are just frazzled. You see, because you kind of have two kinds of situations here. You've got a high-functioning kid that's oppositional defiant being bad, and then you've got the nonverbal kid who's pooping in his pants. You can't do any normal activities with him. Mom and dad are frazzled. I went to a big church outside of Dallas, and they had a respite program where you could take all the kids and take them in, and they'd have games for the kids. Mom and dad could have a night off by themselves. One poor set of parents went out in the parking lot, turned on the AC and the music, and just listened to music in their car. They were just frazzled, and they just wanted to, you know, have a break. Okay, I'm going to put up the jobs here for the music and math minds, things like computer programmers, engineers, physicists. I'll put those up there so you can write them down. Okay, let's take another question.
How much things in the community do you think you actually have to like go out and find versus just having resources for people that...
Okay, what kind of things should you go out and find like, instead of having resources? Okay, first of all, you're asking me a question that's way too abstract.
Well, like, I mean, like, are there things that you would want to see, like, people in the community do, like, in the libraries, like, have more material on it, or...
Well, I think, you know, people need, I think I always recommend parents join their local support group. But, you know, what I'm saying, I went to a very small elementary school that actually was very similar to some of the small rural schools in Nebraska. And the mild Aspie in rural Nebraska sometimes does better because they put him to work out at the farm than the Aspie in the city stuck in a big classroom with 30 kids and all kind of sensory overload, too much bad behavior, I think the community, and this is something that my mother's really interested in, needs to get together. You know, the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and we need to be getting the different community resources, you know, together and networking. You know, we got to start getting creative. Funding's all drying up. We got to start getting creative. And I think we're getting back. We got kids in college, I mean, they're just taking machine-graded tests, and I'm pretty horrified. Some of the stuff I'm reading with this Maclean's magazine, this the Canadian Time magazine, man, it was just trashing. And I just read a thing on the plane yesterday and this morning about, you know, critical thinking. How do we solve problems? Now, I don't do politics. I vote and I keep that to myself. And I don't participate in politics. But I'm a child of the 50s. We got stuff done. 50s, 60s, we went to the moon. We built the interstate highway system. We did stuff. We're not doing stuff in this country anymore. I think Washington is so dysfunctional. I'm a bipartisan basher of what is going on in Washington right now. They can't get anything done. They've gotten away from practical problem solving. It's all partisan BS. Okay, here's jobs for the verbal thinkers. You know, some of these guys would be really good at specialty retail. And one job I don't have up there is the fine chef. That might be good for either the verbal thinker or for the specialty or for the visual thinker. But we got to be thinking, when kids are in middle school, what are they going to do when they grow up? Some kids, trade school may be where they ought to go. Usually they won't take them until they're 16. They'll take them at 16 in an auto mechanic shop. Been just looking into some of that stuff. But we've got to get these guys working. You see, and the problem we have is you guys have got to deal with such a big spectrum, going from kids that are, you know, not toilet trained, that need a totally different, and are never going to live on their own, to Steve Jobs Jr., that's going nowhere, addicted to video games. And people say, well, you're an old fogey, why are you trashing video games? Look, if they're getting jobs doing this, I'm not going to trash it. If they could make money sitting in a basement playing video games, I'm going to be a lot more sympathetic to it. But no, instead they're collecting Social Security checks. And where's the older one? He runs the maintenance department at one of the big plants. See, this is the thing I find out. See, I go back and forth between these different worlds. The ag world, and ag world's a really good place for a lot of these guys that are kind of different. They often do really well with ag stuff. Okay, let's just open it up for some more questions. Okay, back there.
How did you bounce back when social interactions went bad for you, or you were teased? Or...
Oh, I was teased horribly. Let's discuss that. Teenage years was my worst part of my life. I was teased horribly. I had to be taken out of a large girls' school. There are some high school kids where I think they need to finish up online. But that doesn't mean that they need to be sitting at home all the time. They can finish up online, they need to be working. Even if it's volunteer work. That kid needs to be working. And they need to be doing some stuff outside the home. The other thing, you need to have a gradual transition from the world of school to the world of work. I'm seeing too many kids graduated from college and they're playing video games, or they're just sitting around bitching on the internet. That doesn't do any good for anybody. Okay, let's look at some of these questions we've got here. I already talked about therapies I received as a child. You got to get lots of one-to-ones with a really good, effective teacher that kind of knows how hard to push, and I'm not going to fight over which therapy you use. You know what? I don't think it really matters. The thing I have found is that the good teachers kind of just morph all the therapies together. What's important is getting that progress. You know, like if a mom tells me that her kid's only getting an hour a week of one-to-ones, I said, you got to get more. But don't sell your house for this. You don't have to do that. I said, if the school's doing an hour of speech and an hour of OT a week or whatever, you need to go in and watch what they do, get some volunteers, go to your church or something, get some volunteers to do more of it, and use that professional as your guide. So I certainly believe in having professional guidance. Future speech and language pathologists, and what do I recommend for them? I think I pretty well talked about that. How can professionals be helpful? I think we've discussed that. Now, one of the things I see about these questions are way too vague. I have found that when we're troubleshooting, and I find this with animal behavior too, people say, my kid has behavior problems in the classroom. I don't know what a behavior problem in the classroom is. What is it? Is this a 3-year-old in nursery school? Is this a high school kid that hit his teacher? Is this a 5-year-old that had a tantrum? You got to tell me what it is. I can't even begin to answer a question about behavior issues in the classroom if I don't know what it is. Let's go through some of these. How much of a move is factual? Oh, the movie. All right, let's talk about how much the movie is factual. All the projects I built are real. All the projects, the work stuff is really real. Things were built off original drawings. The main characters are real. Mother, my science teacher, Anne, those are real. Now, our events were compressed. Things were compressed. My blind roommate, I had her in graduate school, not college. They had to compress events. There were some things that were switched around, but everything was in character. Claire Danes became me. Autism was presented accurately. We were very, very fussy about clinical accuracy. It showed sensory problems. It showed my visual thinking. But to make a 2-hour movie work, you have to compress and change around some events. But the geek side of me really liked the fact that they had all my projects. I just love having all my projects there. And, okay, the yogurt issue that was asked about, that's been answered. What's the most important thing you want us to take away from our interaction today? Build on strengths. We need to build on strengths, and we need to be looking at what's the outcome for this kid. There's a kid that's called an eco-artist. This is a boy that was, I would say, moderate to high functioning. He can talk, and he liked to rip up paper. And his mother had him make art out of ripped up paper. And he makes this art. It's called the eco-artist. It's absolutely gorgeous. Okay, that's an example of building up strengths. You know, when I begin to telling my story to others, the first talk started back in the mid-'80s. And then I really got into it hot and heavy, 90s. And then there's a question in here about religion. I think the best thing with religion is keep everything positive. Emphasize the golden rule. Emphasize, treat other people the way you want to be treated. That sort of stuff. And avoid any negativity. Okay, here are jobs for people with poor verbal skills. Running copies, stocking shelves in stores, stuffing envelopes in offices, it's a lot of things they can do. What we got to do is start networking in the community, and this is something that Mother's really into. It's getting people networking. All right, let's take another question. I'll leave those up there where you can write them down. Hopefully you can see them, okay?
How do you teach empathy?
How do you teach empathy? Well, I think one of the things that helped me on empathy, and I have a chapter in Thinking in Pictures on learning empathy, is I think the hugging is important. Because I think that being able to feel the hugging, you get those feelings of kindness. And I think that's extremely important. Now, when I was a little kid, I'd stiffen up and I didn't want to be hugged. And the squeezing machine helped me to tolerate being huggy. Well, I can hug real people now, I don't need the squeeze machine. But that had to be desensitized. And that is actually one of the easier things to desensitize. But remember, light touches are alarming. Firm pressure. And let the child, you see, the thing that was good with the squeeze machine is I could control it. You see, and that helped to desensitize me. You see, because when I got too much, it was like too much of an overwhelming good feeling. And in Thinking in Pictures, I really get into a lot of the sensory things. Okay, right there.
I'm an old shop teacher, and I just want to say I really appreciate the 2 cents worth you put in for.
Well, I think that taking out the hands-on classes, that includes cooking and sewing too. And sewing and shop aren't that different. The only thing that's different is one's material stiff and the other soft.
The other thing was Claire Danes was terrific playing you in that film, but I have to say, I have to go down, but you in person are far better than Claire Danes.
Well, Claire Danes, I think she did a really good job on, being me. Okay, this is something that my mother is really into. It takes a village to raise a child. And this is, I read an interesting thing about boys that were getting into crime and what was done to kind of solve this problem. They got teachers, therapists, businesses, law enforcement, religious organizations, all working together to work on this one bad boy. You know, where the whole community is saying, okay, you know, you steal cars, let's say that's what it is. You know, and you have the prosecutor right there and the judge right there, all in the room, saying, well, I got this paper and I can send you off to prison. And everybody cooperates together. And this has sometimes really helped. There's some case studies where this has really helped to turn some of these bad boys around. But the whole community has to pull together and say, no, this is not acceptable. Also, there's other, when you have a kid with severe autism, you've got an awful lot of stress in the family. You know, siblings feel left out. This is something my mother's really concerned about and wants to work on helping on some of these kind of problems. And this is stuff that Mother's working on right now, which is kind of getting an informal network of heads of organizations where you get like maybe 3 or 4 people on a conference call. And they can really let down their hair because it's off the record and really talk about stuff. The only thing that could be logged is who was on the conference call. No tape recorders, and well, no, okay, no tape recorders don't exist anymore. And small, you know, getting groups of people together. We got to get people communicating about how to deal with problems. So it gets back to the whole, you know, problem-solving thing. Okay, then I've got some slides on medication. Okay, let's take a few more questions. Okay, right there.
Do you believe there are any traits or characteristics that lend themselves to professionals who work with children that have autism?
Okay, the question was, do you think professionals, which kind of professionals can work with kids with autism? Well, sometimes people that are a bit on the spectrum. I think we need to tap into some of our older Aspies, you know, that have been successful out in business and things like that. And our people, older people on the spectrum, working on this. Because I'm seeing too many young Aspies, or now they're going to get rid of Asperger's, okay, young people on the higher end of the spectrum, you know, griping around about stuff. And, you know, we've got to get, I think we have to emphasis on, no, you can't just sit in your room and play video games. Like when I was in high school, I wanted to stay in my room. They didn't force me to study. I was at a boarding school, but I was not allowed to stay in my room all the time. I had to come down for meals. Movie night, they let me be the projectionist. Staying in my room all the time was just not allowed. And that was real important. You know, we've got to start thinking about getting this guy functional. And then the other thing, what I've been reading about boys, is the importance of positive male role models that can interact directly with the boy. Doesn't have to be a dad. It's nice if it's a dad, but it can, you know, it could be the shop teacher. It could be a counselor. But we've got to get much more into goal-oriented. What is really the goals of education? When we graduate, stay out of trouble with the law. Okay, a few traffic tickets maybe. Be a productive member of society, which means you get a job, you're not on welfare, and have a, you know, reasonably happy life. And be doing something that's not just the, you know, it's the little entry-level job. You know, that's what the goals of education are. You know, and I think in college education, you know, you take the kids that are the word thinkers, they'll often major in history, and that's the group that's having the hardest time getting a job. See, the art people sell design, things like that. The math people, computer programming, things like that. But the word guys, some of them get hung up on radical politics, and that's not where you want them to go. But there needs to be a lot more emphasis, okay, in the, you know, let's say, okay, even on this campus or on my campus, in the philosophy department, the history department, no, they can't all become philosophy professors. That is not realistic. There's not enough of those jobs available. Okay, so if you want to major in philosophy, history, English, anything like that, you need to be coming, or you want to be coming out of that program where you write really well, and you got really good critical thinking skills. But then if you're a history major, you put it in the context of history. If you're a philosophy major, in the context of philosophy. But they need to be coming out of those programs with really, really good ability to communicate, ability to write. And student writing skills are atrocious. And how do kids learn how to write? When teachers copy edit their work. Well, if you have a class of 300 students, the teacher doesn't have time to copy edit the work. That's how I learned how to write. Teacher would scribble up the paper, red mark up my paper, and then I had to correct it. Okay, right over there.
I'm wondering, you mentioned that you were teased or bullied. Did anyone give you specific strategies to handle those?
Well, I just had a terrible time with teasing, and I think there's some situations that are so horrible you just got to take the kid out, especially in high school. And the only places I was not teased was the specialized interest groups: riding horses, rocket club, and electronics. The kids that were interested in those specialized things did not tease. And those are also things where, I mean, I wasn't doing much studying when I was in high school, but I learned work skills. I cleaned those stalls every day. I fed those horses every day, and I put them in and out of the barn. I repaired the barn. That gate that's shown in the movie, I actually built that gate. That is accurate. I was 15 when I built that gate. You know, that was learning some work skills. And I put a lot of emphasis on learning work skills because the unemployment problem, especially on the high end of the spectrum, has got worse. Where are all the old Aspies? They'll best get jobs. Now, there is some bad problems where they get laid off at 50. I've seen some bad problems there. Their company went out of business or something like that. But at least they had a job until they were 50. That's doing better than some of them are today. See, and I take a real outcome-based approach. I do the same thing with animal welfare and cattle handling. Well, the cattle walking rather than running and crashing into things. You know, that's an outcome. Okay, right there.
We adopted a child who's now an adult with Asperger's. And one of the characteristics, you have great strategies, and I wish I had known this 20 years ago, but the stubbornness.
It's never too late to start.
Well, and I do appreciate that.
And they can be really stubborn. But I was basically, okay, let's go back on, how old is he now?
31.
And what's he doing?
Writing books and hoping to publish.
Well, then you see, then you have the whole thing how he's supporting himself. And well, maybe he needs to just have to start helping to pay for the food. And he's going to have to do some work to help pay for the food. And maybe get the family finances out, and lay them out, and say, you're going to have to start pulling your weight. Now, you're a professor here?
No, I'm a staff member.
You're a staff member. Okay, well, you have a job here. You got a paycheck you get here from the University of Nebraska. You take out your paycheck. Are you renting? Do you have a mortgage?
Yes.
All right. You get the mortgage bill, all the things, and show him. I have to work at the University of Nebraska. I make this amount of money. And I mean, you may have a husband. You know, the husband's making this amount. I lay all the finances out. And he's going to need to start pulling his weight.
Well, he does live in his own apartment.
Oh, he does?
But he does receive Social Security disability. So you gave me some really good ideas, but how do you deal as a parent?
See, the other thing that's a problem, and I've been talking to a guy that's on Social Security disability, he's also on HUD housing, is that as soon, let's say he gets a job at Walmart, then they take away his medical and they take away his apartment. You see, this is completely screwed up, and he says it's a trap. And that he's basically right. Because he has a nice apartment, and he's got his medical care. You see, the way the program is set up is wrong. You know, because there's no reward. You know, what reward would I have for working if I'm going to lose a nice, I have to live in a dump rather than a decent apartment?
Well, and I have to say he's had several jobs over the years, but inadvertently gets fired.
For why does he get fired?
Well, it might be that he sees peers teasing each other in a way that they know it's okay and they're not going to complain to the boss?
I think the best thing, what I learned on that kind of stuff, is just don't do it. You know, we had a staff member, she's gone now, that used to send dirty jokes around on the email system. And some of them I thought were pretty, well, I'm not going to report it, but I just don't do anything like that. I treat email like every email, there is no private email. Nothing on the internet's private. That's my rule. And I don't do jokes, and I don't do that kind of stuff, because I still don't pick up the social cues. You see, this is where an understanding boss can help, to just explain to him why he shouldn't do this. One of my volunteer jobs I had, one of my internship jobs I had in college, and I had internship jobs in college. I worked in a research lab, and I actually worked on a summer program for kids with autism and other disabilities. And I didn't like the way the staff, God, and I didn't touch it. Oh, okay. That the staff were treating this kid. Well, instead of going to my department, which was child care, I went over my boss's head to the therapy department. Now, my boss didn't fire me for that. My boss just sat me down and explained why I should not do it. And then I did not do it again. See, that was being a good boss. You see, some bosses kind of know how to work with these guys and some don't. And when it comes to teasing and jokes, I just don't do that. You know, and I think it's better to be overly formal. You know, and I have certain really close friends where I can let my hair down, but at work, I have a rule. Sex, religion, and politics, we just don't do those subjects at work. Period. That's a rule. You know, especially partisan politics. I don't discuss that. I think the whole system is dysfunctional, but you see that's bipartisan trashing. So I can get away with that. But partisan stuff, I just don't participate. I do vote, and that's private. Okay, now would you rather do more questions or hear some stuff about medications and problems with medications? Okay, what would you rather do, more questions or hear about medications? And there's way too many of them given out to way too many kids, way too young. You want to do medication? Okay. All right. When you evaluate a treatment, either a drug or a, let's say ABA or something like that, you got to look at risk versus benefit. And I think giving powerful antipsychotics to 5-year-olds, that's not a very good risk versus benefit. And there's a lot of vendors out there and a lot of super expensive stuff. So that's BS. How about evidence of effectiveness? Now the problem I've got is on some of the sensory things, it works on a subgroup. So you can get a study that says, well, that doesn't really work. Well, the problem is in autism, you have all these subgroups. Okay, let's look at the antidepressants. You know where these drugs really work? Anxiety, panic attacks. That's where they really work. And the 3 best ones are Prozac, Celexa, and Lexapro. Small doses, we already discussed that. Little doses. These ought to be called anti-fear drugs, anti-fearance. Because what they do in small, and you've got to be really careful not to overdose. Because when you use them for anxiety and panic attacks, it often takes much lower doses than using them for depression. The anti-stressants, the anti-fearants. They saved me. I've been on them for over 30 years. Atypical antipsychotics, they're being handed out like candy. And they, if you look at the scientific papers, yes, they help improve autistic symptoms. But the problem is, they have horrendous side effects. How about weight gain? How about osteoporosis when you become old? How about diabetes? These are like really bad side effects. Now, if you're schizophrenic and you're hallucinating, yeah, it stops that. That's a pretty good risk versus benefit. But the thing that's bad is I'm seeing these drugs being given out to 5-year-olds because they fidget. That's not a good reason to give out powerful drugs like this. Let's do more exercise, less sugar in the diet, things like that. Now, sometimes you need these heavy guns. You got an older child or adult with extreme aggression problems. They can't learn how to cry. So I have an irritability, sensory-induced aggression. They work for that. In a low dose, you want to use the lowest possible dose that works. And there are nonverbal people on the spectrum where these drugs, when used correctly, keep them in the sheltered workshop. I'm not saying you don't use them. I like to use the military analogy. Antidepressants are the light weapons, these are the heavy weapons. And the problem with heavy weapons is they cause more collateral damage. And that's like the side effects. In my books, Thinking in Pictures, and The Way I See It, I have a lot of drug information. But in my Way I See It book, it's only in the 2nd edition. Low dose principle applies to antidepressants, both the SSRIs and the tricyclics, and the atypicals. You want it because you see the thing with the antidepressants, you give too much, you get agitation and insomnia. Now, there's a genetic test to help you determine the dose, but that's too expensive to do right now. There are genetic differences in how these drugs are metabolized. I don't think a local hospital can do that yet. You know, it's probably like a $500 test. Okay, here are some principles of using medication. Try one medication or one supplement at a time. Try to figure out what actually works. You know, at least have a few weeks in between things. Don't do a new school and a new diet at the same time, because then you don't know what actually worked. Especially when you're using powerful medications, it should have an obvious beneficial effect. There should be something, wow, oh wow, this stuff works. That's the way it was with me when I took antidepressants. Now let's say you got a kid that's on 8 different things and you got to get them off of some of it. You take them off slowly. I've talked to a lot of good psychiatrists. Their whole practice is getting kids off of all the garbage they shouldn't be on. You need to figure out the relatively few things that work. And be careful switching brands of generics. They are not bioequivalent. I have found that just with the medications I take. With the antidepressant, I had to take some diuretics. I found it with that. They're not bioequivalent. So if you're taking Walmart's white pill, then stay with that. And if you have to switch, you may have to do some dose adjustment. They're not all the same. So you want to stick with whatever brand you're on. Try to stick with that brand. And don't expect any drug to give you 100% control, because it won't. 80 or 90%? That's real good. That's a good wow. Okay, some other medications that a lot of people don't know about that are really good for anxiety and sleep aids are blood pressure drugs. Things like clonidine, the beta blocker propanolol, blocks fear and blocks the sympathetic nervous system. Sometimes it's going to aid with sleep. I know people that are visual thinkers like me, and they take a little bit of antidepressant and a little bit of a beta blocker to help them sleep. The Defense Department is doing a lot of work with beta blockers on PTSD. But these are old drugs. They're real cheap drugs, too. You know, the drug companies come out with a lot of new stuff right now. It's all BS. They're just patent extenders. There's nothing new coming out right here at the moment that's anything really new. It's just a bunch of BS to run up your bills. You know, they tweak the formula, call it a different drug. And when you read the advertisements for these drugs, there is no benefit over an older drug. It's just new. And they're doing that with the atypical antipsychotics, and they're doing that with the Prozac-type drugs, and it's just BS. You know, I think there are some new things coming in, that'll come in the future, but they're not anywhere near here. They're truly new, but a lot of that stuff that they're calling new is just BS. You know, Walmart's got everything you need. You don't need to be going broke on this stuff. Okay, another kind of drug that's often used, especially when you have aggression in more severe clients, that comes out of the blue. He might be listening to his music player and he blows a fit. That might be psychomotor epilepsy. And often and there's no antecedent for it. It just throws a fit. And it's actually seizure. But these are very, very difficult to track down, unless you want to do a sleep-deprived EEG with no sedatives. Because as soon as you give sedatives, you wreck the EEG. You might as well not even do it. Well, they're going to rip all the wires off their head. So why don't we just try one of the epilepsy drugs? Now, the problem we've got with these drugs is they can really screw up your liver. So you got to do blood tests to make sure they don't wreck your liver. Now, there's going to be a blood test that they'll be able to do at the doctors to see if you have the genetics. It's all genetic. Can you take this stuff safely or not? In other words, do one awful blood test out of the arm. But until that test is available, we need to keep asking, because it may start to become available. But what if you don't have that test, that first year you're going to have to do 4 of these horrible out of the arm. they're taking any of the epilepsy drugs or anticonvulsants. Now for the atypicals and the Prozac type drugs, you don't have to do blood tests, no blood tests. That's one of the reasons why doctors like to use them, because they don't require blood tests. These things do. And I had a student that they gave her some epilepsy drug for her migraines. I don't know what it was. And they did not do the blood tests. And 8 months later, she was almost dead from liver failure. I didn't know she was on an epilepsy drug. I would have been throwing a fit and saying, you get in the doctors right now and you're doing blood tests. I didn't know about it until she got really sick. But if you take your blood tests, then these drugs are safe because they pull you off of it before it hurts your liver. But these can work where you have certain types of aggression, especially in lower functioning clients. You have a client that's nonverbal and he takes a little bit of this, takes some of this stuff, and maybe take a little bit of Risperidol, they can stay in their sheltered workshop. How about ADHD drugs and autism? On the lower end, or let's say on the more severe end, usually makes them worse. On the mild end, there's a lot of crossover between Asperger's and ADHD and attention deficit, and they work. You will know. One pill, you will know. Love them, hate them. 1 or 2 pills, you'll know. You gotta look up all your interactions. Everything interacts. Herbal stuff, prescription stuff, cold pills, everything interacts. You gotta look this stuff up. We already talked about special diets, omega-3. Let's get 10 tons of sugar out of the diet. Let's not eat sugar, high glycemic carbs for breakfast. I'm a big believer when your brain's a bit different to support the animal agriculture, because I find if I don't do that, I don't function. Now my O blood type thing, I can't prove that, but I'm finding as I talk around, that's the so-called carnivore's blood type, that when I talk to people that tried to be a vegan and it failed to work, most of them have been O blood type, and I'm O positive. Here's typical traits in family history. We got anxiety and depression on both sides of the family. My grandfather is the co-inventor of the automatic pilot for airplanes. There's an awful lot of techie people in the backgrounds. Mother's side of the family, intellectual giftedness, artists. You know, I remember the little things on the music mixing board, the little things you slide. What would happen to Albert in today's school system? Little Albert sit by himself, playing with blocks, no language until age 3. Where would little Albert go today? This is something that makes me really nervous. This is a book about famous people that probably had Asperger's. A great book for a kid to read is Being Teased. That's just some places you can get more information. And we still have got a few minutes for questions. Of course, I got to put my books up there. Yeah, let's just talk about developing talents. That's my employment book. If you're interested in the social things, the unwritten social rules, I did that with Sean Barron. And that book compares and contrasts me with Sean. Sean had a lot more social circuits hooked up. He got frustrated more. I'm just happy to become a pure techie. The way I see it, it's my most basic book. If you're only going to buy one book, I'd probably get that one. The Autistic Brain, that's going to be coming out in May. It's going to be really getting deep into the biology. There's thinking in pictures. And then I've got the Emergence and my 2 animal books up there. Animals Make Us Human, Animals in Translation. And then I've got other animal books. I got Livestock Handling and Transport. I got Humane Livestock Handling, Animal Behavior Genetics and Animal Science. We're just revising that one right now. Okay, we got 5 more minutes for questions. Okay, right here.
Are you currently teaching any classes at Colorado State?
Yes, I'm teaching a short course. It's called Livestock Handling. And I've had to change this course some because I'm getting now a lot of pre-vet majors that want to become dog and cat veterinarians. And I have my students design some livestock facilities. But I've been changing that more into just a problem-solving visual thinking exercise where I know half the class doesn't care about designing this thing for a meatpacking plant, but look at it as visual problem solving. You're going to have to figure out how to fit this design in around existing site restrictions. And there can be different ways of doing it that work. You've got to figure it out. So even though this is something that you probably have no need to learn how to design this, I want to teach you how to think. And then another thing I've added to my class is my internet assignment. I make the students pick out a very narrow subject in animal behavior. And I let them use any animal. It doesn't have to be cattle. And then, of course, I teach my regular cattle behavior stuff. But it has to be very narrow. Like they can't do horse behavior, that's too broad. But maybe they could do weaning behavior in colts. And then I want 2 articles off of PubMed, journal articles. 2 off of Web of Science, 2 off of Google Scholar, 2 off of Science Direct. So you got 8 journal abstracts. Then I want you to write a paragraph this long. What did you learn from these papers? Tell me, what do you know about weaning of foals now and how they behave? And what I'm finding with that assignment, 1/3 of the class, the top students like a baby assignment. For the next third, it's a really good assignment. And for the last third, it's an essential assignment. So for 2/3 of the class, that internet project is an assignment that's extremely educational and worthwhile. And maybe if you see, you've got the big spread of students. And then for 1/3 of the class, it's a baby assignment. Okay, it's a baby assignment, so it takes you an hour to do it, It takes you 2 hours to do it, just do it. But for 2/3 of the class, it's really good. We're getting a signal here to quit. One more quickie. Okay, right there.
With the food allergies, is that because of the biological?
Food allergies, why you're getting food allergies and things. The thing about it is immune system and nervous system are interlinked. You see, there's a lot of skin problems. I have them. You see, if you look back to the embryos, skin, nervous system, all that, that's one layer. Then you got the then you got the muscle layer, and then you got the gut layer. These things, there's linkages there. I have a lot of, I have allergies, and I also have skin problems. I think we're going to have to end there, and I want to just thank everybody for coming, and I'm doing a talk tonight. It's going to be about livestock. I hope you come.